So my question for you is, as we start to move the chess pieces around and need to have a conversation with moderate folks in the electorate who don't normally think about nuclear weapons issues, do you feel like, well, we feel like, and I'd like to hear your thinking on this, that a place to start is start by pushing hard for a congressional declaration and a presidential declaration of no first use. And armed with a no first use policy, I think we can make the case to the electorate that the entire land-based leg of the triad is a first use weapon. It's not a retaliatory or a defensive weapon. So if you could speak to sort of the strategic thinking around that and whether you agree or don't.
Yes, when I was working with Physicians for Social Responsibility, Jesus, a long time ago now, 25 years ago, in 1993, 94, 95, I remember going to one of the weekly lobbying meetings, somebody saying, "Here comes Mr. No First Use," when I came in the room, because I was always the one adding this to the agenda and emphasizing it, and they would put it in, but I had to mention it. People weren't as enthusiastic about that as I was. So, as being practical or having anything. Now, something that has to be faced is, of course, we should have a no first use policy, yes. What ran into that when Obama wanted to get it, actually, and he was confronted by his Secretary of State, Kerry, Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, and the Department, I forget what they called him, a head of energy, I guess, yeah, Muniz, who had the control, in charge of building the weapons, actually, all against them. And I don't know what Muniz's problem was, probably people at the labs working or something. But Kerry and Carter both came in, said, our allies, we haven't prepared them sufficiently for this. Now, this is 2016. Actually, Obama had been for this, at least as early as 2013, hadn't pushed it. So now in 2016, he was making, I think, said, no, the Japanese, and then the Eastern Europeans, the Poles and Baltic states and so forth in NATO, are against this. And oddly, the British were against it. I can't entirely rationalize that. But anyway, they said they were. And so, in other words, our allies. And these people who benefit supposedly from the nuclear, quote, umbrella, that is the threat by the US to blow up the world if they are endangered. Nothing short of that. And, blow up the world, I keep emphasizing, is not total extinction, it's just near extinction. And that's our promise to them. We'll kill everybody, nearly everybody, if you are endangered by a conventional attack, that would be the first use part, or by a nuclear attack. And, you get a nuclear weapon on you, a tactical nuclear weapon, we will kill everybody, nearly everybody. So that's the basis of our foreign policy for a long time, meaning, what do we get out of that? And the answer is we get a kind of economic hegemony in NATO and these others, or at least we get in on their conferences, and they can't do tariffs against us and hold us out of their economies and whatnot, because we are their protector. It's a protectorate. And yes, there is various economic and political advantages to doing that. What makes us a European power in NATO and in Europe in general? That we threaten nuclear war. Now, no first use means we take away that threat. Should they be threatening to blow up? Well, they want to, as a deterrent. It will affect our relations with them unless we provide some substitute, which should be possible. We should be able to have a sufficient influence in the world economically and every other way without preparing and threatening and rehearsing blowing up the world for them. We should not be making that threat at all, and nobody else should. But they can hold over us. I mean, people do, are like Kerry and the others. They say, oh, well, then Japan will want their own nuclear weapons. And they used to say Germany. It's a little hard to think that Germany now feels so threatened by Russia, as they could say plausibly 50 years ago. But Japan, Poland, Baltic states, should we be threatening if the Baltic states suffer the fate, let's say, of Crimea or something, to blow up the world? Well, they say, I would say no, sorry, not. They say, gee, why aren't we as deserving of that as your other allies have been for 50 years? And the answer can only be, but American politicians are not quick to say this, we were wrong then. It was an insane policy. It was an evil policy. Don't expect them to say that, but it was. And we're not extending it. I mean, we're trying, you should learn. We want you to learn why it's so bad. What do they know about nuclear winter? Let me guess, nothing. Our people haven't been told about it by our government. And have theirs? I doubt it. I've always asked myself, do Europeans actually realize what it would mean if we carry out the promise that they keep insisting we make, that we respond to Russians with nuclear weapons? They all die. Do they have a good grasp of that? And I don't know the answer, actually. I suspect they just didn't think about it very much. But anyway, no, we should not, we should make foreign policy on a different basis from that. And of course, we can. But not just from one day to the next. As they say, they say we have to bring along Japan and these other countries. We have to change the prospect. The other thing, David, if I may say, when people say no first use, they are talking about what I'm talking about here, that in a conventional war, we might escalate to nuclear war or answer to a weapon on our allies. But actually what these first strike weapons that you talk about correctly are really allegedly for is to preempt. It's not to go first, it's to go second first. In other words, when you think that there's another, that they're about to attack you, then we preempt. It's all our planning, that's what the weapons are for. Why? To limit damage. Well, since we now know about nuclear winter, will it limit damage? No. It's a delusion, it's a hoax, it's a pretense, but it's very profitable to Northrop Grumman and Boeing, which dropped out of the race only because Northrop Grumman stole away the maker of solid fuel rockets, which was cooperating with Boeing, and Northrop Grumman bought it. And Boeing says, oh, we can't compete anymore now. They've got the solid rocket fuel. So they dropped out of the running. So they now have a single source. There's no open bidding. So Northrop Grumman can, they make a lot of money about preparing for this, even though it's totally infeasible. You cannot limit damage by attacking Russia. The world goes. And even before the smoke, without the smoke gets the southern hemisphere. But a war with Russia destroys us even without the smoke. So, but as I say, preparing for it, very profitable. The aerospace industry has relied on that since about 1947, having discovered that when their contracts ended in August of 1945, with the end of the war, they couldn't make it in the commercial market unless they sold a lot of planes to the government, warplanes. Now, to sell the number of planes they needed to keep afloat, you had to have a very big enemy. It couldn't be Germany. We were occupying Germany. Russia was the only place with enough targets in it to justify buying a lot of warplanes from Boeing and Lockheed and the others who needed the business. And it's been that way ever since, essentially. So we have to educate people, which shouldn't be that hard as a matter of education, except getting the audience is not easy, to the fact that the idea of limiting damage by striking first preemptively in a nuclear war is as much of a hoax as limiting damage by anti-ballistic missiles. We've actually managed to make people aware that ABM is a hoax with respect to war with Russia or even China now or whatnot. Counterforce, for which the MX, but then the Minuteman III, the GBSD, they're all based on hitting Russian missiles first. They wouldn't regard that as precluded by a no first use agreement. No, this is defense. This isn't initiating nuclear war. They're about to initiate a war. We're just getting the drop on them, like high noon. That's all. And you can't get away from that as long as this delusion of that striking first is less bad than striking second persists. And it persists because it's a very, very profitable delusion for these companies. So that's why I'm so enthusiastic about Hartung. He is focusing on them as a political target, as a change. It isn't just thinkers like Henry Kissinger or whoever who are in the think tanks who are doing this stuff. It's people whose income depends on making everybody believe this myth that although nuclear war must never be fought, as Reagan agreed, it shouldn't be prepared for either. The myth that it's worth preparing for, it's worth striking first, it's worth building new accurate missiles, improving the accuracy of Trident missiles, for example, which serves no purpose other than the totally delusional notion that hitting their missiles will limit damage when their submarines can cause nuclear winter. So I'm saying, yes, no first use is worthwhile, but I think a lot of education, I used to focus on that above all. Right now, I'm saying get rid of the ICBMs.